right. Good morning. I'm Susie Lusk with the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for joining us today. It's so good to see your faces. Carolyn Davis is with us today from the office, and our speaker is Greg Coker. Greg Coker is the president and CEO of Greg Coker Development, Inc., whose mission is the development of the individual, team, and organization. Considered an expert in human behavior and organization dynamics, his vision is as a result of reading his books, attending his keynotes, workshops, recipients are moved to achieve higher levels of performance and their organizations better places to work. He is the author of Building Cathedrals, The Power of Purpose, Soft Skills Field Manual, and Healing the Wounds, Forgiveness and Reconciliation in the Workplace. His clients include education, business, industry, correctional facilities, and high performance individuals who benefit from his personal coaching. We've known Greg for years. He used to be on the board of the Tennessee Chamber, and he has presented several this summer for us. We enjoy his presentations. They're very informative and optimistic, and we appreciate you, Greg. And I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Susie and Carolyn, and everybody on the call. It's Friday. Oh my gosh. And for you guys on the call, I won't say you got tricked. We're going to just have a good time this morning. We're going to learn some things. I'm going to learn from you all. We're going to chit chat a little bit. To say the pandemic has changed everything is an understatement. And I wouldn't wish this on my worst nightmare of anybody. But bottom line, we're going to come out better, stronger, and faster. There's so much to learn in the Zoom. As much as I love seeing Carolyn and Susie, and I do in person, it's usually with Carolyn, it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. We meet in Jackson, Tennessee or whatever to start that program. But when I can't go to Nashville to see Carolyn or Susie or Knoxville or wherever you guys are, this is not a bad alternative. We've been on for the past 15 minutes because I'm paranoid. I've been doing this since March, and I'm still paranoid. I get real close to God before these Zoom calls. I'm like, God, please, I know I asked for a lot, but just please let this darn thing happen. And then all of a sudden the client will throw in some crazy platform. I'm like, could you just do Zoom? Just when I got comfortable with Zoom, and then it doesn't work and I'm all frantic or whatever. But bottom line, we were sitting here chit-chatting about, cats on the screen, and I had a colonoscopy last month. My wife says Greg's an open book. So literally, we were chit-chatting about all kinds of things. And I only tell you those stories is because when you do a Zoom meeting, and you all know all this better than I do, this workshop or this presentation is going to be me just throwing out a bunch of stuff. And please use the chat function because Susie and Carolyn didn't tell you, you all are going to be presenting too. You all are going to be sharing your thoughts, your ideas, because we're all new to this. I've been doing it since March, but we're all new to this. So I need your all's thoughts, your tips of what you found. But one thing that I have found is this is a nice alternative. And my wife is a lot smarter than I am. Even before the pandemic, she would always say, now, why are you going to Nashville for a 15-minute meeting? Couldn't you do that over the phone? Now, how many have had spouse significant others that, I gotta go. And I drive to Knoxville for 2.5 hours from Bowling Green, or Nashville with traffic for a good meeting. It was 15, 20 minutes maybe, or 30 minutes, or even an hour. But I look back and I'm like, she was probably right. I probably could have done that just as effectively. You can't put a price tag on the personal touch, obviously. But this morning is more about, I'm going to share my observations. And I've worked with the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce and Industry for a long time. I was on the board. Great organization. So many organizations after the pandemic crawled up in a fetal position in the corner, and they're still there, or they're slowly crawling out of it. The Tennessee Chamber of Commerce and Industry with Carolyn, with Susie, it didn't take very long. And they were saying, Greg, what can we do? We're already serving our membership, but you've got something to offer here. Let's talk to you about what you can do and how you can do it. And not all organizations did that. There's a great book called Traction, and leaders are readers. And if there's basically 3 books that have changed my whole perspective on business this year, one was Traction, And if you've not got the book Traction, buy the book Traction. One, Start with Why with Simon Sinek. I mean, Google the Simon Sinek TED Talk. It's the number 2 most downloadable. I don't know what number 1 was because everybody's downloaded Simon Sinek Start with Why, the Golden Circle. And then the third book is 4 Disciplines of Execution, 4DX. And Caterpillar's a client of mine. And the CEO of Caterpillar and I are having dinner. He goes, those 3 books changed my whole perspective of how I run the company. But the book Traction talks about there are certain organizations that gain that traction, and there's certain ones that are sort of spin their wheels. And you all wouldn't be on this call if you weren't the ones who obviously were gaining that traction. Carolyn, I think you got some that are waiting to be admitted. You got that. So anyway, so before we get started, I think Carolyn, maybe Susie will monitor the chat room. So use the chat function to make comments, ask questions. And when we stop, maybe Carolyn or Susie can sort of moderate. Greg, you got a question here, or someone had this point. So thank you very much for being with us. I talk a bit about the water cooler, with the Zoom call. The manager and all of us, the drivers, and we're all that management. It's management and leadership, not or. I tell folks I was hired by a great leader and fired by a great manager. And I do a lot of programs across the country now talking about it's management and leadership. Well, guess what? In a virtual world, you got to manage, you got to lead. We manage things, we lead people. And very often the manager in me, we're supposed to start at 9, then 8:58, I'm ready with my agenda. That's great. That's the manager in me. The leader is on a Friday morning, especially, maybe we spend 10 minutes of sort of that water cooler talk, because the water cooler for very minimum has been taken away. So, to say that the pandemic has changed the way we do business is an understatement. It's totally changed the way we've done business. It's been a complete paradigm shift for all industries. Susie and Carol and I were talking before you all jumped on about school systems. I do a lot of work in school systems. Summer school is going to take on a new meaning this summer. Now, how many agree with that? Even I think your younger folks are going to be going, I didn't get this my junior year. I didn't get that my senior year. And now my local school system is offering some summer programming. I want to go. That didn't happen before the pandemic. And you think about, when you and I'm 56 years old, you are a lot younger than I am, but we left school in May and I didn't want to come back to September, and we didn't. Now my kids, they're 26, 28 years old. But I remember they were ready to go back to school. They enjoyed summer for a little bit, but they're pretty much wanting to go back to school. Well, the paradigm's totally changed with the pandemic. I think it's going to be continuous learning and students even being more responsible for what they hadn't gotten before. So a complete paradigm shift, not only in school systems, in your business, the way we do business, the way we use virtual learning, et cetera. So before we even get started, the number one thing I'm telling my clients, and they're already doing this, is you've got to debrief the pandemic. It ain't over yet. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. But if you and your organization have not gotten your folks in a room and saying, what went well? What can we take past the pandemic, and where have we gotten stuck? What were those vulnerabilities that were exposed? School systems. One thing that was exposed was broadband deployment. We thought everybody had broadband. Well, we knew it didn't everybody, but it exposed that even the ones that had broadband, their speed wasn't what it needed to be. My speed probably wasn't what it needed. Still not what it needed to be, maybe. No offense, I won't talk about who I've got. It's not AT&T. I used to work for AT&T. I long that I've had AT&T again. I don't have a cable company. But anyway, you've got to debrief with your company what went well, because the number one comment I get from employees is, Greg, I have never been more communicated with. I have never felt more trust. My sister works for Tennessee Department of Transportation. She's working at home full time and loving life. Now they're going to start going back here pretty soon. But my sister, who works there in Nashville for the Department of Transportation, with state government, other folks in the private sector here in Kentucky where I live, in Tennessee that I work and do a lot of work in, whatever, the employees are sitting there going, thank you. I needed that flexibility. I'm working hard. I worked last night. I know you all, I don't do this all the time. I'll be honest with you. I woke up at 5:30 yesterday, literally started working about 6:30, 6:45. I didn't stop until 10:30 last night. That's not normal. I'll be honest with you. That wasn't normal. But because of virtual, I could do that. I worked all day yesterday. Now I got to monitor that. What message am I sending my employees when I send an email at 3 o'clock in the morning? Because they want to be like me. And if you've got people working for you, they want to be like you. I mean, think about it. I mean, especially when you were a lot younger. I mean, you emulated your boss, whether you realize it or not. Well, if you send out an email at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you've got that reputation in the office of, oh my gosh, she's a machine. She sends out, I got an email from her at 3 o'clock. Be careful, because you're going to make dysfunctional employees out of your employees. How many have done that before? So you got to be careful everything we do. But employees, I had Marshall Goldsmith, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith from Kentucky, lives out in La Jolla, California. If you Google Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, the #1 executive coach in the whole United States. I mean, he and Francis Hesselbaum have written several books, Jim Collins. I mean, he's big time. But Marshall tells a lot of stories. Marshall says, be careful of the signal you send your employees because they're going to emulate what you do. So I would say debrief. What went well and where did we get stuck? And again, going back to Marshall, I knew I had a thought there somewhere, but Marshall was talking on a podcast a couple of days ago as I was listening, and he goes, someone said, how do I know if I can trust my employees? His response was, trust them. You'll know if you can trust them or not. Now, how many would raise their hand with that? I mean, the folks that are working from home, it doesn't take very long to realize that they're kicking butt and taking names. And if they're not, that's going to expose a vulnerability anyway. So, the #1 thing I hear from employees is I've never felt more communicated with. I've never felt more trusted. So you got to channel that. You got to capture that. What didn't go so well? What vulnerabilities were exposed? And you better do it pretty quickly because people have short memories, and you start getting on once we're back to some new normal, which hopefully we'll get back to some normalcy at some point. Make a virtual world a survival/competitive advantage tool, because these younger employees, and any younger employees too. I mean, my sister's, I'm 56, my sister's almost 60. She's loving that flexibility of working from home. You've got to make it a survival competitive advantage, because guess what? Every employee has this white line right here. Now, this white line is basically a metaphorical white line. Is you never thought you would take that call from a recruiter. You never thought you would update your resume. But now you're sort of thinking about it. And I use my son-in-law as that example. Works for an engineering firm, a good employee. It's privately owned, the family business. They're old school. Chris they weren't paying him what he was worth, #1, which is a big mistake. #2 is all he wanted to do was work from home maybe 1 day a week. He basically, his office in this engineering firm was in a basement and wasn't around anybody anyway. He's an IT guy. He just wanted to work from home maybe 1 day a week. They wouldn't let him. My wife is a hairdresser, and she cuts actually somebody from Nashville. Is a recruiter in downtown Nashville, and they hooked up and they called Chris, and Chris started talking. Before you know it, that white line became a little bit clearer, and Chris accepted that phone call, and Chris interviewed with a manufacturer here in Bowling Green, and Chris got the job, and they paid him $15,000 more money and let him say that he can work from home 2 days a week. And he was this close to taking the job. And he went back to his old firm and said, I'm resigning. I'm sorry. And he goes, well, his immediate supervisor said, we can't match salary. And I don't know if we can work from home. So, we're going to miss you. The president heard about it. The president called him and said, no, you're not leaving. We're going to pay you what you're worth, and you can work from home 2 days a week if you want to. Why weren't they doing that in the first place? Because that white line with our employees out there, if we're not careful, it's going to be something that they may look at that flexibility, and the paradigm is totally changed. And I'm not saying we all, I mean, a lot of us can't work from home. I work in the construction industry, Harrison Construction in Knoxville. I was telling these guys, I was there last 2 Thursdays ago. They can't work from home. They got to be in the office, but you're working with someone who's working from home. One of your customers is working from home. So even if we're not working from home, this new environment has impacted everyone. So make a virtual world a recruiting retention tool strategy. Is that, that little bit of flexibility. People don't leave companies, they leave people. How many agree with that? I mean, the companies that I've worked for, the guy I got fired from, not a bad guy. I was hired by a great leader and fired by a great manager. I'd have never, and I was even updating my resume. I knew my days were lumber, but I didn't want to leave that company. That company's still a great company. I was leaving Kevin. That's the piece, but also outdated, inflexible policies. So we've got to look at our policies. I'm not saying abandon principles or do something that we can't do, but at least to look at them. Again, that white line with our employees, hopefully they don't see that white line, but sometimes it appears. Well, how do we navigate through these new realities of a virtual workplace? Again, take notes of what you're thinking in your chat function, because we're going to end early where you get a chance to say, here's what I'm learning. So again, this is more of a sharing session. It is a workshop. A big part of the answer lies in soft skills, emotional intelligence. And I wrote a book called Soft Skills Field Manual. I tell folks I'm an accidental writer. Had I never been fired from corporate America, I'd never written a darn book. The first book, Building Cathedrals of Power Purpose. Second book is what employers like you all were telling me I can teach them the hard technical skills, Greg. What I either can't teach them, I don't have time to teach them, I just assume they got them, are the soft skills, that emotional intelligence. Well, that's needed as much now or more in a virtual world. What we did, Carolyn and Susie and I did before we got on the call, the chit-chatting, the being warm, the smiling. And even if you got to fake it, how many, when you're on mute, and even if you're multitasking, I've got my computer right now, but guess what? I've got below my computer, I got my iPhone. I can get my email through my iPhone. I can even get Facebook through my iPhone. So if I'm bored to death, whatever, let's be honest. I've got an attention span about like a gnat, and I'm ADHD. But guess what? While I'm actually multitasking, I got to tell myself, I got to smile. Because guess what? They're looking at everything. This. They're looking at what's on your desk, and we've got to be very conscientious of all of this, but that's all the socials, the soft skills. And the way I define soft skills, all the dynamics outside the technical aspects of doing one job. That's soft skills. It's culture. It's forgiveness and reconciliation. That's a soft skill. Yeah, I think we've narrowly defined soft skills. Most folks define soft skills, basic communication, working together in a team, problem solving. Yeah, those are all soft skills. But forgiveness and reconciliation, what if I said something on a Zoom call that I was a little bit curt, or I look and I'm like, oh my gosh, I said it the wrong way. Well, guess what? I've got to follow back up with Carolyn after the phone call and say, how you doing? I'm okay. And I can tell you a little bit, what did I say, Carolyn? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way. And I hope you didn't take, well, I understand, Greg, you're not a stress or whatever. I've got to follow up with all that. And even probably more so in a virtual world. And that's the soft skills. Here's my book, Soft Skills Field Manual, on my website, gregcokerdevelopment.com. All 3 of my books are available free downloads. Again, going back to Marshall Goldsmith, a lot smarter than me. I was with him one day and someone walked up to him and said, Marshall, I hope you don't mind. I stole some of your material. He goes, you can't steal my material. I give it all away. So I looked at him and said, they're going, you've written 100 books and you're big time and you give it all away. He goes, yeah, I give it all away. Greg, you're trying to hawk your books for $20 a pop and you're killing yourself carrying them in the airport with boxes. What do you make, about $300 a gig or whatever? Is it really worth it? And if there's one person that's not going to buy your book because they don't have $20 in their pocket, they just don't want to buy it, why don't you just give it to them? Wow. He goes, yeah, because if you give stuff away, you're going to make more money. They're going to come back to you. He's right. And that's what I learned during the pandemic, is because when the pandemic first started, I was very sales focused. I was scared. And I was calling everybody going, Carolyn, Susie, go, y'all got something, y'all got something, y'all got something. They were in a buying mode. They were in a survival mode. But once I changed the service from service then to sales, because if you serve, guess what? People are going to buy. People buy on emotion and justify with fact. People buy on emotion because they like Susie. Then they go back and justify, well, we're going to do this program with the Tennessee Chamber because it's a really good program. Well, it is a good program. But because of Carolyn and Susie and all the other, and Bradley, the face, that's what they buy from. And in a virtual world with your customers, if we're not, how do we enhance that emotional impact? Because people buy from people, not from companies. And even in a sales environment virtually. So we talk about that in the Soft Skills Field Manual. All three of my books are available at no cost, gregcokerdevelopment.com. There they are. Building cathedrals of power purpose. What's your cathedral? You're laying brick, you build cathedrals, soft skills, the unwritten rules. And then that third one, forgiveness and reconciliation in the workplace. So emotional intelligence. Your EQ, your emotional intelligence has never been more important, via Zoom. Your emotions are contagious, especially if you're a leader and if you're open up the Zoom call, you set the tone, you set the pace for your Zoom call. I call it the psychology of the greeting. The way I greet my customers when they walk into my office, the way I greet my employees that morning sets the pace. Susie, that's your cat on the darn, can you get that? We're going to talk about that a little later on too. I love this because what's that's done to all of us. Now, you'd have never done that 2 years ago. My wife, I used to work for AT&T, and my wife used to say, Greg, when the kids were small, you had 2 phones. I literally had 2 cell phones. And if we were driving down the road and my boss called, I'd look at my wife and kids and go, don't say a word. Hey, Eddie, how you doing? Don't talk. Now, how many would do that? I'm sitting there going, chill out. Now, if I work for myself, but if an important client calls and my dog barks or my kids are grown now, if they come in here, screaming or crying or Daddy, I love you. I go, hey, Eddie, hold on 2 seconds. Hey, can you let Daddy have a little break or whatever? But all of this, that's emotional intelligence. And you set the tone for your call, especially while working virtually. The converse is true. If we spread negativity, mistrust, fear, gloom and doom, morale, team organizational effectiveness suffers. We excel just not through how smart we are, which you're all smart, IQ, but through your EQ. So the 4 components of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness. How are you leading virtually? Maybe this is the time for a debrief of with your team, even if you don't have direct reports, is sitting there going, folks, let's just time out. Today's call is basically how are we working together virtually? What's going well? Where are we getting stuck? And guess what? This is not going away. Even my training business, I booked something 2 weeks in North Carolina. It's an in-person deal. I booked something in Puerto Rico. It's Zoom. Darn it. I ain't never been to Puerto Rico, but that's in May. So, and a lot of my chamber clients, they're doing in-persons, but guess what they're doing? They're doing hybrid too. So now your employees that used to couldn't attend that fancy conference you're attending, now they're going to be able to attend it. Yeah, it'll be in the conference room, and you can't let them know you're out there, whatever. But hey, listen, I can't go. I'd love to go. Susie, you and Carolyn go. I got to stay back because I got some other meetings. But guess what? I'm going to join on that session because I really want to hear that session. So it's going to be a hybrid moving forward. And how we continue to even get better at this stuff. Self-management. How do you adapt? How are you resilient? Keeping your cool on a Zoom call. Because you're not in person. You don't have that time to be able to look back at somebody and whisper and go, dude, yeah, I'm okay. I was just really saying, I don't know why we're doing this. So you've got to be even more conscious. Social awareness, taking care of your folks virtually. Understand and appreciating the dynamics of what's going on with the 7 other people on the call. Relationship management in a virtual world. Managing the one. I love that. It's called job sculpting. Managing the one. If you've got 10 people on your team, you better be managing 10 different things. You manage the team of 10 people, but I got to go to Carolyn. and find out after the call. So if I'm the team leader and if I've got a call in the morning at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, sometime during that day, if not that day for sure, the next day, I better be following up with those 10 people on the call. How you doing? Are you doing okay? Just want to check and see what's going on. What are you doing? I hear wind. You're walking? You're walking. How many have done that? I mean, I work all the time, but guess what? If my wife walks in here and goes, what are you doing this afternoon? Well, I got a call at 1. I got one at 3. Well, you want to walk at 2? Yeah, I'll go walk at 2. How cool is that? I mean, so if my marriage is better, then guess what? I'm going to be a better employee. If I'm a better employee, I'm going to be a better husband. So it works both ways. And again, I think more good's going to come out of it. Relationship management, managing the one, individual follow-up. So my audience, here's my assumption. And my audience is varied. Those who are communicating, working, pretty much traditional in-person meetings, everyone. Those working from home exclusively, or at least a hybrid. Those that are still going to work, but working with someone of the above. So that's probably everybody. So even if you're not working virtually, you're probably working with customers, clients, key stakeholders, et cetera. So again, we've got to lead virtually. And leadership is action, not position. So these are things, obviously, you know better than I do. You wouldn't be on this call right now. You wouldn't have accepted this invitation from the Tennessee Chamber had you not realized this is good stuff. Not my program, but working virtually. And I'm good at it. I want to get better. It's the folks that are not on this call that I sort of worry about sometimes, that don't even realize that it's going to be around forever. The hybrid part of it. So these things. These are just things I think about as a social scientist, and that's what I sort of am. Is I sort of observe things. Your face and your dress. I'm actually wearing khaki pants this morning. I ironed my pants this morning because I'm going out to eat lunch with my wife today. But sometimes I got sweatpants on. Most times I don't. And I say that is because I've got to get mentally. I've been working from home way before the pandemic. And when we moved to this house, we've been here almost 2 years. There weren't French double doors. I put French double doors on my office. I got a TV. I wanted this office at home to feel like my office at work. Because if I can't mentally get pumped up and I take a shower in the morning, most days, there are some days that, because I've been doing it long enough now, I'm in sort of a groove. I can put a hat on and sweatpants and come in here if I'm not on a Zoom call and still be motivated. But for the most part, I've got to get mentally focused. I've got to get in the shower. I've got to put a nice sweater on. I ironed this morning because I knew I was going to be on with you all. But still, I've got to get my coffee. So when my daughter walks by or my wife walks by, she knows this is Greg's office. He's working. He's either on his Zoom call or training or doing something. But what's my face look like? What's my dress look like? Am I presenting? And even if you are working virtually and you still work for the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce, guess what? You represent the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce. I'm working from home, but I still represent the company I work for. What's your background? People notice everything. I got news for you. And you know this. They notice everything. I was telling Susie and Carolyn, back in the day, I would have gotten a buddy of mine's book. I'd have put in a book back there in big letters and let him or her have 10 Zoom calls. And at some point, someone goes, dude, do you realize that book is back there? A bourbon bottle, what's on your bookcase back there? Now I got to straighten up my computer here real quick. And I'm conscientious of my nice lamps back there, whatever. Now you all, if I see the Tennessee Chamber, you've got those, and I love those. Whatever your background is, people notice everything. Your nonverbals. And you got to manage those distractions. I think the cat distractions are funny. The dogs barking are funny. What I got to manage is my wife. God love her. She's a flight attendant and she flies out of Nashville. And yesterday she had to fly. She left about 10. I was on a Zoom training from 9:30 to 11:30. And I'm not taking a break yet. She comes in there at the door and she's like, where's your keys? I'm like, where's your keys? I'm like, what? She'd driven my car to Nashville 2 days ago, and her flight attendant badge, she was in my car, so she couldn't find my car key. So you got to manage those distractions. So now my wife will leave me notes going, are you hungry? What do you want for lunch or whatever? And hand it to me or whatever. I mean, but I got to manage those nonverbals, your engagement level. 26% of employees are fully engaged. Gallup does this poll every year. 26% are fully engaged, 55% are partially engaged, 19% are totally disengaged. Every year they do this, and the numbers rarely change. So you got to be the 26%. You got to be that actively engaged. The 55% are going through the motions, and they're good employees. 19% are totally disengaged. And I right now, if you would have put 26, 55, 19 across a sheet of paper and put every one of your employees, you could probably label each one of them, could you not? It's not fair to label employees, but guess what? If you want fair, go to Carnival. I mean, we get labeled all the time. Virtually, you probably label everybody on your call. You got the 26% that are like what I'm doing right now up there. Even if I got to fake it a little bit, I'm sort of leaning forward, good comment, whatever. And you got some that are laying back there and, working. I'm surprised on this freaking mute. I mean, how long is it going to take you to realize you're still on mute, whatever. I mean, or unmute or whatever. I work the legislature. I lobby the legislature. I am amazed at legislators that testify and they steal their mics 50 feet away. Nobody can hear you. Can you not put the darn thing up there? But little things like that, listening skills, active listening, manage distractions. I take a chill pill. Hey, if you get distracted by someone's cat or kid jumping in or whatever, I mean, chill out. And then I talked about the mute or whatever. The technology is impressive. I like Zoom. I'm partial to Zoom. I think Zoom's the easiest. That's just my preference. But guess what? It's not about Greg Coker. It's about my customer. And if my customer wants GoToMeeting or something else, WebEx, I've got to get comfortable with it. And even though I'm not comfortable, I got to adapt. And my daughter of the night heard me in there raising hell, excuse the French, because one of my customers or clients got on some crazy platform. I knew the darn thing wouldn't work. And I was in there screaming, and my daughter's 28 goes, Dad, they're your client. You better get used to this. And I know I hate you're in your right. I teach this stuff, but I need to live it. Know the functionality. I mean, I'm impressed. I mean, the chat function is pretty remedial, but breakout sessions, polling, screen. I mean, I'm screen sharing right now. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. There's now companies that will come in, and as you know, a client of mine last week that I did this presentation with paid them, I think, about $15,000 to manage the whole conference. And they are the professionals. They had tutorials, and I was one of the speakers, so I worked with them the week before. There's some impressive technology out there, but insist. I know you do. Insist on practicing. Get on the week before. If you're not comfortable with the technology, ask my son. Will, I had a PowerPoint. I didn't realize you could put 2 PowerPoints down because I had 2 PowerPoints during a session 2 days ago. And my son's a whiz. I said, Will, can I do 2 PowerPoints down to minimize? And he goes, Dad, I think so. He said, send me a Zoom invite and we'll test it out. So, you got to test things out. You do that. Your meeting outline. Now, this is a meeting. Forget your meeting. Forget virtually. Whenever you do a meeting, I think these 7 things should all, well, not 7, 6 at least. Water cooler talk is virtual, but at least these 6 should always exist. Number 1's the outcome. What is the outcome of the meeting? Folks, after you do the water cooler talk virtual coffee, which I think is important, especially virtually. So if your meeting starts at 8, say, we're going to get on at, hey, listen, we're going to 7:45. We always get on 15 minutes earlier because Greg and Susie and Carolyn are working on the technology. Get on with us. If y'all don't mind listening to us to talk about technology, but guess what? We're going to have my coffee's gone now because I put it in the sink. I was a good husband this morning. My wife, just wash your, anyway, so my coffee's gone now, but you're drinking coffee and, 15 minutes worth talking about nice sweater, Coker. Where'd you get that sweater? And, having a good time. And then at 8 o'clock, you get started. Folks, we're going to get started this morning. The outcome of this call is this. So, always start with the outcome. We're going to basically do 3 things this morning. That's the agenda. Roles. The number 1 reason for conflict in teams is lack of role clarity. The number 1 reason for conflict in teams is lack of role clarity. So folks, I've asked Susie to join us this morning. The reason I got Susie in here, and she typically doesn't always join us, but Susie's with another department, and Susie's role today is going to be a resource because we're going to be talking about the technology, blah, 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 whatever. So, because if you don't, everybody's like, what's Susie doing on? What's she doing on there? You ever had that? I mean, why is he on here? You know, because your teams go from form, storm, norm, perform, and you've got to go through orientation. So what are the roles? Who's everybody on the call? Norms. So let's get started before and you can have the norms. You should have these just populating every time because you started back in March. The norms probably don't change. You know, let's attack issues, not each other. Let's manage distractions, even though we're sort of laughing about your dog, Coker, barking at the FedEx guy. You know, at least can you put them in the bedroom, you know, whatever. So manage distractions. So what are these norms for working virtually? So let's put them up here. Parking lot. Well, that's the chat function. I love the chat function. So guess what? At any time during a meeting, you want to say something, but you're afraid if you say it, then guess what's going to happen is it's going to distract Greg or distract Susie. Now, how many have been in meetings like that? I mean, it gets it totally off kilter. So put it in the chat and maybe have someone that's the chat monitor. And then before you end is debrief. See, there's 3 things to any intervention. Any training video you show, there's the setup, there's the management, there's a debrief, no matter what you do. If you show a safety video in your company, setup, management, debrief. So how do you set it up? Most folks just manage it. And sometimes they don't do a good management. They stick the video in, okay, turn the lights down, make sure Greg and Susie aren't over there telling jokes. Greg, Susie, you all separate or whatever. I mean, that's management. But the setup, here's the video. Here's why we're showing the video. Here's why it's important. Now, what questions do you all have about this video we're going to see? That's a setup. Then you manage it. You do manage distractions, make sure the volume's up. Then you debrief it. Why did we watch the video? What did you learn? How does it apply to our organization? And it doesn't change virtually. There's 3 things that you do every time. Setup, management, debrief. So before you end that call, a debrief. And these are the same things right there, 3 parts of any activity. Setup, management, debrief. And I can send Carolyn and Susie the PowerPoint if you're interested. Again, like Marshall, everything I got, you can have it. If you have trouble sleeping, then take a look at it. Problem solving, virtual problem solving. I'm intimidated by problem solving models because I'm right brain, but guess what? It's pretty logical. And guess what? During the Zoom with my team is we use GBAS. Well, what's GBAS? Well, it's pretty logical. Goal. What's the goal? So if our goal is how do we enhance customer service for the Chamber of Commerce, that's the goal. Well, what's the barriers? Well, we're working virtually. We've had to postpone some conferences. We've done this, blah, 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 blah. You know, what are all the barriers? You don't want to spend too much time on the barriers. What are some alternatives to how we can better serve customers with the barriers in mind? So then you brainstorm. You know, let's get these, use round robin and go around the horn, because if you use brainstorm, I'm going to dominate. And 1 or 2 people are not going to say a word. That's just human nature. So maybe use round robin where you basically say, Carolyn, you got 15 people on the call. Do you mind just, you know, let's go around the room and here's the lineup. Carolyn's got the lineup. We're going to start with Greg. If you don't have anything, Greg, pass. Then we'll go to Carolyn. Carolyn, if you've got something, Greg's already said it, just mark it off your list. You can pass. We'll go around a couple of times. That's round robin. So you're getting some alternatives. At some point, you got to select the alternatives. So before we end this call, it's going to be a 2-hour call. We're going to select from the above alternatives, and you're sharing your screen. So Carolyn's typing in all the alternatives. And then at some point you have a discussion of which 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 we want to do out of these 20. And then the last part's the sequencing. That's the action plan. I mean, I'm a pretty responsible person, but if my name doesn't get on an action plan, the odds of it getting done are slim to none, and Slim and Elvis just left the building. So I've got to make sure before we let anybody leave this Zoom call, we're going to make sure we're doing this right here. So Carolyn's going to bring up the action plan for our call today, and she's typing in the what. We said we were going to make sure we're going to investigate hiring a virtual company to do our conference in June. That's the what. Okay, who's going to do it? Well, Greg, you said you would champion it. Greg's not going to do it all, but Greg will at least start the process. Who else wants to help Greg with this? Okay, Susie, you want to put your name on there? So Greg and Susie are going to champion it. When? Well, Greg, when do you want to get this done? well, I got a busy week this week, but I'll call sometime Monday, maybe by the 15th of March. When we have our meeting then, I'll have at least who I've talked to and the pricing. Okay, next. Again, if you let everybody get off your phone call or your Zoom call or even a personal when you're meeting in person, you don't have this action plan. Again, I'm a pretty responsible person, but if my name doesn't go on an action plan, I got too much stuff going on. Sometimes I lose sight. 4DX, if you've not bought the book, 4 Disciplines of Execution, wow, that is a phenomenal book. I work with a company here in Bowling Green called Blue Cotton. They're a t-shirt company. And Mike Coffey said, Greg, you suggested 3 books, and I liked all 3 of them, but the one that I'm totally changing my company over, 150 employees, goes, I'm totally changing over 4DX. And he's hired a consultant to come in, the 4 Disciplines of Execution. That last one is accountability talks. You know, basically, this is what I said I would do. If you have them on Monday morning, this is what I actually did, and this is what I commit to doing this week. And those are the 4 disciplines. That's that 4th discipline. So take a look at that book if you get a chance. Stay aligned with your company values. You are a billboard for your company, even if you're working from home. My customers, if I work for Caterpillar, guess what? Even I'm working virtually, I'm still Caterpillar. And would Caterpillar approve, you know, that sign that says it's hard to fly with the eagles when you soar with a bunch of turkeys? I don't have that on there, but that's a true story. I was actually in a guy's office and he had that on his desk and he wondered why his employee morale was low. He had no idea what that signaled. And somebody even said that we did 360-degree feedback. And they go, Greg, he's got that sign on his desk. He thinks we're a bunch of turkeys. He didn't know that. He just had it because he thought it was cute. Maybe his cousin gave it to him. He stuck it on his desk or whatever. You know, you've got to realize you are the billboard. Understanding, maximizing, and appreciating all the different styles on your call. You know, this is social styles. And Susan and Carol, I know this is one of my signature models. I love social styles. I love Myers-Briggs and DISC, but I like this one. It's so easy. Driver, analytical, expressive, AIMLS. And we look out of all 4 of them. You look out of all 4 of them. But we tend to look at them maybe 1 or 2 more than the other 3. So on your call, you've got drivers, analyticals, expressive, and AIMLS. More than likely, if you got 12 people on your call, right now we got 20 or 30. I guarantee there's somebody for every category. So what do the drivers want? They want this regular, but they definitely want it virtually. It's bottom line focused. Why are we meeting? What are we doing? And let's get the heck out of Dodge, because I got other stuff to do. You know, and that's okay. So that's why you hit that outcome at the very beginning. Folks, thanks for being on the call. For those that joined us at 7:45, we had a good time. I spilled coffee all over me. Susie's cat was all over the place. So let's go ahead and get started. So guess what, that driver, you don't have to get on at 7:45. If you don't want to get on at 8 o'clock, we don't want to waste your time today, you know, playing around. And there's some folks on your team that don't have a need for the coffee and the water cooler talk. That's fine. That's who they are. That's why they're effective. Then you got the analyticals. They need that outline. You know, they'll be more engaged because now you're more organized. They need the data. They want to slow it down a little bit. And you got the express like Greg Coker. I like excitement. I need attention. You got to brag on my sweater. You know, keep it popping. You know, let me do the chat function for you. Greg, what are you thinking out there? Because that's who I am. That's my personality. Aimable, trust, a safe environment. They may not like change that much. Don't embarrass them. Do not call them out. That's why the round robin, when you're brainstorming, would be more effective with the AIMLS than the brainstorming. Because brainstorming, the AIMLS not ever going to raise their hand anyway, because they think maybe their idea or well, let somebody else say it. I don't want to feel like I'm a know-it-all or whatever. But at least have them go around the room. So if I'm that AIML, you say, you know, you can pass if you want to. Okay, next, Greg, pass. Okay, next, Susie. But guess what? The next time, Greg, I might feel comfortable saying it, but you don't embarrass me by saying, Greg, what do you got? You've been quiet over there for how many have done that before on a call? We haven't heard from you, Greg. What are you thinking? Well, if Greg's aimable, you've just embarrassed him. And you've got to be very conscientious of that aimable personality. Safe place, don't embarrass, and maybe follow up via Zoom, because they're going to like more the one-on-one than the full Zoom. So maybe call and say, hey, how's it going? Just don't, just want to make sure you're okay. I'm calling everybody, even if you're not calling everybody. You don't want them to think, well, you think something's going on with me? No, I'm just following up with everybody. How you doing? Family doing good? What y'all doing this weekend? Because see, the top part is management, the bottom part's leadership. The top part is IQ, the bottom part's EQ. The top part is the brain, the bottom part's the heart. And you got to manage all of those. What about stages of a virtual world? I talked to form, storm, norm, perform. Guess what? Your team, every time you get on a call, you start with form, and then eventually you might storm a little bit. You attack issues, not each other. You'll never get to norm unless you go through storm. And maybe you have some norms on how you storm. Saying, folks, we're going to attack issues, not each other. But through the pandemic, we definitely started at form. And we definitely have gone through some storm during the pandemic. Hopefully we're starting to norm a little bit. We're all getting used to it. There's some vaccines out now. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe through the pandemic, we're starting to perform a little bit. And then post-pandemic, we totally transformation. We've taken the good, we've left the bad, we've learned from it. We're better, we're stronger, we're faster. What about your leadership style? This is called situational leadership by Paul Blanchard, or Paul Hershey and Ken Blanchard. Old model, but I love it. Directive, coaching, supportive, delegation. And with the folks you do virtually, you got to direct. That's one-way communication for the most part, folks. Thanks for getting on the call this morning. I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to let Carolyn and Susie facilitate. Bottom line, here's what the mission is. Here's what I think we need to do. Okay. Then eventually coaching, folks. Here's what I think we need to do now, but what do you all think? What questions do you have? See, that's more two-way communication. And then eventually, I don't know what's going on out there with some of our customers. I don't know if we've just sort of let them drop through I don't know. You all are the experts. I need for you all to take a look at this. What do you think? That's supportive. And then eventually saying, folks, I'm going to be on the call occasionally, but I'm going to be down the hall. If you all need me, Greg can come down there and knock on my door. I'll come back to the call and get on a Zoom with you all, or you text me and I'll get on here. But, you all got it going on. So again, how are you managed? Directive coaching's management, supportive delegations leading. It should be called situational management / leadership. Serving customers in a virtual world. What do your customers want? They want friendly service. Nothing's changed, even virtually. And that's where you enter human, get down to business, exit human. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So they want friendly service. They want flexibility, even in a virtual world. Even though your business has been turned upside down, they still want you to be flexible. They understand they can't come to your office because it's closed, or you don't have drive-through, or you don't have this. They understand that. They want some flexibility. They want problem resolution. Still want problem resolution. They want recovery. Once we screw up, they want us to say, I'm sorry, which there are 4 steps to recovery. Not going, oh crap, we screwed them. Whew. Oh, I don't know if I'll call them again. Well, no, you got an opportunity to make them more loyal. But there's the 4 steps. The first thing we do when we screw up, I'm sorry. Not even if they weren't right, even if they were wrong and we were right, we still go, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened. Urgent reinstatement. You got to do it. I'm sorry. We're going to get that we're going to get that product to you. I'm on it right now. You see, Sue's already left. She's already doing it for you. Boom, that's urgent reinstatement right there. Symbolic atonement, if possible. Waive their service fee. If you can, you may not be able to. At a restaurant, boom, lunch on us today. Now, how many have gone to a restaurant where they totally screwed you over, but they recovered effectively, and you're now more loyal to that restaurant than you ever were before? Or hotel. Because they recovered so appropriately and so effectively, you're more loyal to them now. And then follow-up. Even after the Zoom call is a personal follow-up. This is a human business model. What it basically says is our customers want us to enter on human, get down to business, and exit on human, even virtually. Well, it's not business. So if you start the call at 8:00, okay, guys, I think we got everybody on here this morning. We're going to talk about this product. We got Caterpillar. Caterpillar's a big company, and blah, 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 blah. Well, you just entered business. Now, the drivers may not want a lot of human, but you still got to enter on human. Folks, before we get started this morning, again, I just want to thank everybody. We got Caterpillar on the team, and Caterpillar, you're going to see the best team. We appreciate your all's business. My gosh, if there was ever such a thing as a cathedral, I look at your all's products out there. So thanks for everybody being on this morning. Today's purpose is, boom, human business. But throughout the meeting is let's time out real quick. Everybody still okay? I know we've gone a little bit of time. Do we need to take a break? Human back, but you exit on human. Folks, let's debrief. Man, again, thank you all for your all's time. I think we got a lot accomplished, and I appreciate everybody on this call. That's human. Enter on human, get down to business. But guess what happens? We're not careful. Business. And I use example of a fast food restaurant. I go to McDonald's and I pull up. Welcome to McDonald's. Would you like to try a new frappe? Well, then the real voice comes on. Order when you're ready. Well, they're faking the human. And in a Zoom call, we can't fake the human. With music playing in the background and before everybody gets on, all the opera music. That's human, but I got to be human too. Every time people do business with your company, virtually and non-virtually, they give you a report card. So guess what? If you get on 15 minutes early and you do a good job with Zoom and you've done all this, guess what I give you? A C. You know why? Because the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce set the goal because of what they did, because of all the great things your company's doing. Used to be A for people, now it's C, because now everybody expects it because you did it. That's the good news for you. The not so good news for you is because your competition's good too. And now because of what they're doing, it used to be A and B is now C. So guess what? Customers will leave you on C. There's no loyalty on C. They'll leave you for sure on D. If you recover, you maybe get from D back to C, maybe B. If you really fail them F, I don't know. They may not ever come back. And they're going to put nasty stuff on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Cycle of service. If you got 10 services you offer in your company, you ought to have 10 of these bad boys and girls on your wall. These are all the steps that I have to go through to get service from your company. Then you identify key moments of truth. Key moments of truth is those are where all of these are important. I use like Delta Airlines. These are all the steps I have to go through to fly Delta from BNA from Nashville to Atlanta. Those are all the steps. But then Delta needs to be concerned about the key moments of truth. What are the 2 or 3 things that if they're not careful and they screw up on, I'm going to not only be mad, I ain't never come back to Delta. So you got to be focused on all these steps, but for sure your key moments of truth. So from those working from home, I've already talked about this. We're getting ready to end. Shower, work clothes versus boxers. I'm speaking next week in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm this close to wearing a suit and tie from above, wearing boxer shorts behind the podium. Because I don't wear boxer shorts when I do this thing, but it'd be funny. Be a good attention getter, which is the emotional intelligence. Real office versus a sewing room. How many have been in there? Because guess what? If you're working in your office and you got the sewing machine behind you, and I've done that before, it's hard to get pumped up. It's hard. Make your office, especially if it's going to be full time, make it an office. Create your own space. Let it motivate. I jammed a Steely Dan the other day, and my wife goes, "What are you doing? You got that?" I could do that at work. They'd run me out of the office if I was jamming to something. I can do that now. I can go take a nap, and I do take naps. Role of trust. You got to trust your people. How do you know if you can trust somebody? Trust them. Time management. You got to turn it off. Last night was totally psychotic on my part. I cannot do that and not be burnt out. I've got to turn it off and own the distractions. We talked about that. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And one of my favorite stories is about General Stockdale, Admiral Stockdale, Jim Stockdale. And Jim Collins, the book Good to Great, tells a story. They interviewed him. Jim Stockdale, Admiral Stockdale, spent like 7 years in a POW prison camp. He was at the Hanoi Hilton. After he got released, years later, Jim Collins interviewed him. He said, you spent 7 years, you were beaten and tortured. How did you make it? And he said, I never lost sight that I would get out at some point. And I actually knew it would change my life. And that was an inspirational. Then Jim Collins asked a question. He goes, well, what about the people who didn't make it? He goes, oh, that was easy. The optimist. And Jim Collins, like you right now, I'm thinking, what? He goes, yeah, the optimist. Because what happened is the folks in the POW prison camp, they were convinced they would get out by Easter. Easter came, Easter went. But we'll get out by summer. Summer came, summer went. Well, we'll get out by fall. Fall came, fall went. Christmas Christmas came, Christmas went. He said they died of a broken heart. Now, listen to what he says right here. He says the Stockdale paradox, we must never confuse faith that we will prevail in the end, which we can never afford to lose. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. With the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of our current reality, whatever it might be. So virtually, guess what? Like Rosie Greer used to say, we got to be dealers of hope, not dealers of dope. And the Stockdale paradox for me, just when folks think we're coming out of this back a couple of months ago or a month ago with the vaccine, then there's a variance. Guess what? There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We may not be able to see it yet, but from a virtual world, we've got the Stockdale paradox to realize there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you very much for a great morning. Susie, Carolyn, let's look at the chat function. Hopefully we've got enough time to spend some time chatting. What are your all's thoughts? What are some of your all's aha moments? And I'll sit back and listen to you all. So thank you very much for being on the call.
Thanks so much, Greg. One question is, could you repeat the 3 books that you mentioned earlier?
The 3 books, Traction, Organizational Track, or just Traction. 4 Disciplines of Execution by Sean Covey. And then Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And Start With Why, if you will Google Start With Why by Simon Sinek TED Talk, it's 18 minutes. If you've not watched that yet, grab you a cup of coffee. You're going to be blown away because it talks about the why, the what, the how. And people are more motivated. They'll give you their blood, sweat, and tears with your why more so than your what. Martin Luther King says, I have a dream. He didn't have a plan. He had a plan, but that's the why. So those are 3 phenomenal books. If I had any books, those changed my life for literally in 2020. Other thoughts, comments? Crickets. Y'all are processing. That's good.
I don't see any other ones in there, Greg, but just such great information. And I know I always take different things, and I've heard you speak many, many times. So just fantastic information. I know a couple other questions asked for the PowerPoint slides, which you already graciously said you would share. So
oh yeah,
we'll make sure to send that.
You're on the only second people I've shared this presentation with, and I just try to sit back and go, I'm not going to be able to share anything they don't know. All I'm trying to do is maybe put some models together of some observations and facilitate. I mean, when much of a facilitation of a discussion, I apologize for that, but it's like that. Confucius, the story goes, Confucius has his mentee and he asks his mentee, would you like some tea? And the mentee goes, yes, grasshopper, whatever. So he pours the tea, and the young mentee, the tea starts flowing over the cup, and he goes, whoa, my cup is running over. He goes, exactly like your mind. And I feel like very often as I give so much information in a short amount of time that you need time to process. And your people do too. So when you ask for questions and comments and you get crickets on a virtual call, people need time to process. I need time to process. So don't take offense. And I had to get used to that because I did Zoom training. I was used to that sort of give and take and questions, Bueller, whatever. And virtually, it's a little bit different. Folks process a little bit different than they do in person. Okay, I'll send Susie, Carolyn, I'll send the PowerPoint. Feel free to send that out. My website is gregcokerdevelopment.com. All 3 books are free downloads. I'm on Facebook. I do a Monday Motivator every Monday, much to my wife's chagrin, because she's the producer. She's always there now. That didn't sound right, Greg. Can you do that again? And I tell my wife when she's taping, I'm sitting there going, sit still, because I'm trying to do this and you're over there looking at the floor or whatever. It distracts me. And so anyway, I don't want to drag you in my personal heck, but anyway, so look forward to connecting with you all. Thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thank
so
you,
much,
Greg. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
You too.